Have you ever wondered why you can remember things from when you were 5, 6, or 7 years old, but have almost no memories from when you were a baby? Back then, you were already seeing faces, hearing voices, feeling pain, and experiencing things for the very first time. So, does that mean babies simply can't form memories? It turns out it's not that simple. Babies are actually capable of learning and storing information from a very early age. They can recognize faces, remember patterns of sounds, and even learn that certain actions lead to certain outcomes. The problem isn't simply whether a baby's brain can create memories. The more interesting question is, why can we no longer access most of those memories as adults? This phenomenon is known as infantile amnesia, and the reason behind it involves several different problems. First, a baby's brain is developing incredibly fast. One important part of memory formation and organization is the hippocampus. The hippocampus is already functioning early in life, but its memory system isn't working in exactly the same way as it does in an adult brain. Imagine you're building a library. The books are already there, but the shelves, organization system, and catalog are still being built. So a baby's experiences may be stored in some form, without necessarily becoming autobiographical memories that can later be consciously recalled. And this leads to the second problem. Babies don't have adult-level language. When you remember an event, the memory usually isn't just a picture. There's a place, a person, a sequence of events, a context, and often words that help describe what happened. A young baby doesn't yet have the same language and concepts needed to turn an experience into a lasting story about themselves. That doesn't mean babies aren't thinking. They're simply organizing their experiences in a very different way. But there's an even deeper problem. Memory isn't just about storing information. There's a difference between a brain learning something and a brain being able to retrieve that information consciously years later. An experience can influence your behavior without you being able to remember the original event. That's why you might not remember when you first learned something, while still showing that the experience shaped you. And then there's another factor: identity. When you remember something from when you were 8, you can connect that memory to who you are now. I went to school. I fell down. I was scared. There's a sense of me experiencing the event. But babies don't yet have the same complex, autobiographical sense of self. So experiences from this period may not be organized into personal memories in the same way later experiences are. But here's where things get even stranger. Why don't these memories simply disappear? Because research suggests that early life experiences can still have long-term effects. An experience might not remain accessible as a conscious scene that you can describe, but the brain and your behavior can still be influenced by learning that happened very early in life. So perhaps early memories aren't like files that were simply deleted. It's more like the information was stored in systems that changed as your brain developed. As your brain matured, the way you stored, organized, and retrieved experiences changed too. And that could make memories formed during infancy difficult or impossible to access using the memory system you have today, which leads to something surprisingly strange about being human. The first years of your life may be some of the most important years for your brain's development, yet they're also the years you can barely remember. You were there. You experienced the world for the first time. You learned to recognize the people around you. But most of us have almost no conscious access to that story, not because a baby's brain can't learn, but because the brain that experienced those moments and the adult brain trying to remember them don't work in exactly the same way. And perhaps that's why our lives begin with a chapter that was incredibly important, Yet almost none of us can ever read it again.